Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed my other videos for Evil High Priest. Now this is going to be a semi-review of the game. And why do I say it's a semi-review? Well, because this is all based off a print and play version of the game. I don't have access to the full game because I don't work for Peterson Games. I'm not on their Christmas wish list, and heck, I'm probably, no, they're probably not one of my biggest fans. If you don't believe me on that one, well, you go check out their other Kickstarters, their other video links, and see that my videos are never mentioned, never linked, or anything like that. And I'm not complaining. I'm just trying to let you know that I'm not on their payroll. They didn't pay me to do this. They didn't ask me to do this. The only reason why I really did this is because the Kickstarter came about. I like Peterson Games stuff, and I was like, heck, I'll print it out and play the game. And after I played it a whole bunch of times, I was like, well, hell, if I wasted all this damn ink, I might as well make a video for it so I can show you guys and gals the game so you guys can decide this is a game you like. And, if you don't believe me, if you think I'm on the payroll, I'll just sit here for a few minutes. You go surf the internet and see if I'm affiliated with them in any way. Go ahead. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to just sit here for a minute. If I had a book, I'd read a book. If I had access to my phone, I'd play games. Okay, no, I'm not going to do that because I edited all that out. Anyways, my point being, this is just going to be my honest opinion of the game. I would have liked to have seen more for the game, like the different investigators. I would have loved to have seen the different monsters for it, but I'm not able to do it. So all I can do is just comment on what's in the PDF. And that's what I actually liked about the game so far. So on the surface, Evil High Priest is your average typical worker placement game. Now Peterson Games has always done a really good job, in my opinion, of taking game designs and modifying them and, well, let's just say modernizing a lot of the common game designs and bringing them more modern with various degrees of success. Now you have games such as Theomachy. I mean, you look at Theomachy, what is Theomachy? It's basically poker modified a heck of a lot, I'll admit it, and I'm not trying to be negative towards Peterson Games. I think it's actually very common in this industry for game designers to take a basic design and modify it and improve it, and that's what Peterson Games does very, very well. Take Theomachy, it's basically poker on steroids. You take Cthulhu Wars, it's basically an area control, area majority game, kind of like Chaos in the Old World or a similar game like that, and puts it up on steroids and modernizes the game. You take their game where they have that tower defense game. You have all these games, and then you have Evil High Priest, which is basically a more modernized, updated version of your basic worker placement game. Now, the things that are different from this game, so compared to such as other worker placement games, such as Caverna, to use that as a good example. Now, I could use Misery Farmer, Agricola as an example, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use Caverna, because every time I mention Agricola or Agricola, however you want to pronounce it, I need to call my therapist, get a couple hours of therapy, because it scars me for life. Okay, semi-joke. Anyways, you take a game like Caverna. What is a basic worker placement game? In a basic worker placement game is you're going to place your workers out there. You're going to grab resources, and those resources are going to give you victory points. You're going to keep doing that ad nauseum until you reach the end of the game, whether that's a limited amount of rounds or a certain thing, or somebody gets past a certain trigger or something like that. It's going to bring around the end game. Every single player gets a final round, and that's basically how your average worker placement game goes. So it's basically a style of game where you're trying to take advantage of locations to build up those victory points. And this is the first place that Evil High Priest diverts from your average worker placement game. Because in Evil High Priest, your victory points are the resources that you're so hotly working for getting to win the game. So, just to take an example, this, okay, it's a print and play, I know. This should be, pretend this is an elder sign, okay? If this was an elder sign, if I have this at the end of the game, I have 10 victory points. Okay, that's 10 victory points. That's a good thing. But if I spend these 10 victory points over here, I can get other resources that may help me get more victory points. Here's the trick. If I spent it here, it's gone. I've now lost those victory points. So it's a tug of war. If I do something like spending this blood over here, and I keep bumping these, I'm going to move these out of my way. If I spend this blood right here is 2 victory points. Okay, if I spend these 2 victory points, am I going to spend this on something that's going to help me get more victory points? So if I were to put a cultist here to get another cultist, that may help me in the long run to get more victory points in the long run, but does it help me in the short term? Because that's the really cool thing about this game. Every time you're spending your resources, you're spending your victory points. That's something you have to constantly be gauging, something you have to be constantly thinking about. That's something you have to be very, very careful about. Not only that, the other thing that I found very intriguing about this game is not only do you have to constantly judge how you're spending your victory points, you need to protect your victory points, because you can go out there and play extremely stupidly, and please don't ever do this because you're going to lose miserably and probably hate this game on a grand scale if you do this, But you could be very, very stupid to go out there and do everything you can, blow all your resources to get all of these elder signs and go, yes, 60 victory points, I'm winning, I'm winning, I'm winning. And then somebody decides that, nope, you're not winning no more. Let's go ahead and initiate a raid. Let's roll the dice and, oops, that's an 11. You can't protect those resources. Bye-bye victory points. And that's going to make you head palm, face first, into the table as you just lose all your victory points. And you're probably going to be very, very upset at that point. So again, that adds another aspect to the game that I found pretty darn interesting. Not only do you have to watch your victory points, your resources, judge how you're spending them in all of these locations, you have to protect these resources, because if you don't, you're going to lose your victory points. Not only that, I also appreciate about the game how you have your own personal board that only you can access, which is kind of a cool thing, that only your high priest can go out there and use these various locations to do various things, such as gaining more resources or more ability to protect your resources, gaining more units to put out there, more workers out here on the board. But I also liked how you have this board that would come out later in the game, depending on the play of the game. It'll come out eventually as soon as somebody does a raid, adding more locations, but these are locations that you have to temporarily give up your workers for. That was kind of a cool thing. But the other thing I thought was really cool was this cult board itself. Now the cult board, it's your timer in the game, it's your extra victory points in the game, but not only is it your timer in the game and your extra victory points in the game, it's also extra locations you can add onto the board, which will cause the game to evolve as it goes. So at the start of the game, when everybody only has 3 workers at the start of the game, you don't have a lot of locations to go to. So at the very start of the game, everybody has 3 workers, and the basic only locations they can go to is basically the town board or their personal priest board. But as the game goes on, as players start getting more workers and doing things to gain more workers, more of the board is going to open up. So you have more locations to send these workers. The cult board is going to open up. The ritual board is going to open up, giving you more locations, so the game stays at a constant, like a worker placement game should do, as this constant thing where all the locations are hotly contested, but you're gaining locations as you play the game, adding to the strategies, making the game evolve as you go. Not only to add to that fact is these different cult boards are going to make the game play differently every time you play it. And I know it seems like if you don't play the game, it's hard to wrap your mind around the fact that the different cult boards are going to play differently, but they really, really do. This cult board right here is pretty darn basic. You're going to have these 2 basic resource locations plus this ability to get extra cultists. It's going to create an interesting flow to the game, and this game, as this grows right here, people are going to start getting lots of resources. So this is kind of a quicker board, at least in my experience, as opposed to when you compare it to the Black Goat board. Now, I didn't show you the Black Goat board because I think the Black Goat board in the print to play is extremely hampered, because the Black Goat board is all about the monsters and getting tons of monsters, because every one of these elder signs, I think, well, going off the top of my head, I think almost every single one of these elder signs gives you a monster every time you break it. So you'll go out there, you'll gain an elder sign, and you're also going to gain a monster. Well, in the basic print and play, all you have are these generic monsters, which all play the same. So it doesn't have the cool thing about the real game that has tons of different monsters, have different abilities and different ways they play, and you're going to be adding these monsters onto your boards, giving you extra powers and extra variety. So I think that board is really meant to play with the variety of monsters. So that's why I picked the Cthulhu board, just to let you know that. But my point I'm trying to make here is I've seen how these 2 boards play differently. I've also seen on the Kickstarter they're talking about another 4 or maybe 5 more boards on top of it. And all I can do is just click on the images, zoom in on them, and look at them and see how they're laid out and kind of do a mind game and figure out how it's going to go. But those boards do look like they're going to play differently. They have different abilities. And now, granted, I don't know what all those abilities do, because all I can do is look at the pictures. But it does appear to me that those boards are going to play differently. So in a long-winded way of what I'm basically trying to say is, it looks like Peterson Games has done what they do very, very well. They take a standard game design and they have evolved the game in a way to create an interesting game that stays modern without feeling like every single game I played over and over and over again. Because I'm basically at the point with my board game collection, I pretty much have about a half dozen games that represent every single mechanic. I have a half dozen worker placement games. I have a half dozen area control games. I have 4,000 civilization games because I'm a civilization junkie. 12-step programs are for quitters. I love my civilization games, but you get my point. I'm at the point in my board game collection where before I'm going to add a game to my collection, it needs to do something new. It needs to add variety. It needs to play differently than every single game I own, or do it in a different way that I can appreciate. Basically, it needs to give me a reason to pull it down off the shelf or put it in my collection in the first place, because it has to do something different. Now, this game did the exact same thing of every single worker placement game I already own, why would I buy it? I don't care about the Cthulhu mythos. I am not one of those people who has bought or sold on a theme. This could have been a zombie theme. This could have been trade in the Mediterranean. God, no, please, no more trade in the Mediterranean. But you get my point. This could have been any theme, and that's not what buys or sells me on a game. It needs to do something different. Now, on that topic, I do have to emphasize the fact that, yes, this is another Cthulhu game. Okay, it's not another zombie game, but it is another Cthulhu game, and I know a lot of people have Cthulhu fatigue because it seems like it's everywhere out there. You have lots of horror games, especially this time of year around Halloween, so lots of horror games are coming out there. So we're starting to get a little bit of the fatigue of the zombie games, a little bit of the fatigue of the Cthulhu games, but I can happily say that this game does do things differently. It also makes the theme fit the mechanics of the game. Now, I know with worker placement games, you can almost, and I'm saying almost, don't quote me on this or tie me down and say, you said this, but a lot of worker placement games, you can pretty much marry almost any theme onto a worker placement game. Because the basic idea of worker placement game is, I go here, I take resources. I spend these resources to get victory points. That's a worker placement game. That's the basic bottom line of a worker placement game. What this game does is it does the things I've already mentioned. It makes it so your resources are your victory points, so you're fighting for those resources in multiple ways. It makes it so you have to protect those resources, because if you play dumb, those investigators are going to come out there and strip away your resources. And it fits the theme because, yeah, in an interesting way, they managed to marry some of the mechanics to the theme, especially with the sanctum board where you have all these chambers that you're going to be building up and storing all these resources like an evil cult may do. They're going to store all these resources while the heroes, because we're playing the bad guys here, while the heroes are the investigators who are going out there trying to get these resources, stop you from doing what you want to do, and awakening this great ancient old one. Now, I've already said there's some things I really like about the game. I do enjoy worker placement games, but there are some things that are going from anywhere from an unknown, just because I can't tell you anything about them because of the way the game is, to some things that I kind of found are potential negatives or things that you may want to be very cautious about before you pick up this game. Now, let's start with one unknown that I kind of have a rough idea of, and that's going to be the final components of the game. Now, all I have is this horrible print job that I did, and you can see how well I butchered it by making this cult board, because you can see the lines where I tried to use scissors, and, oh, well, I was in a hurry. That's just the way it happened to be. But you can see the artwork in the game. You can see that the artwork is really good. You can also see that Peterson Games did something that I really love when game designers do this. And please, designers, if you watch my videos, do this. Put reminders on your games. For the love of all that, all of us board gamers enjoy. Put reminders on your games. It makes our lives so much easier. Because anybody who owns more than 30 games, trying to memorize the rules for all these games is kind of a pain unless you add these reminders, and they're so darn awesome. Please do this. So we look at what we have here. We have a very nice turn overview that tells you exactly how the turns work out. It tells us how to get victory points and exactly what everything means on the board. That is awesome. Thank you for doing this. Designers, please do this more often. You have your sanctum board, which has these nice arrows to remind you which direction the raids are going to go. Thank you. That is so nice. You have this nice little tracker right here, which is kind of superfluous, but it's nice. It allows you to track the raids so you can do the math very quickly and very easily. Thank you for doing that. I like that. But what we don't know here so far, we know that these emblems and everything like that are really good, but we don't know what the final quality of all the components are going to be. We can see that the artwork's going to be good, but we don't know if the boards are going to be cheap and flimsy. We don't know if they're going to be thick, high quality. We don't know how that's going to be, so I really can't comment on that. I mean, I can tell you that these plastic painted miniatures are not going to be in the final version. You're going to have little wooden meeples, and hopefully the little wooden meeples are pretty good. We can hope they are. But if they're not, again, those are things I can't comment on. Also, there's things I can't comment on. I can't let you know just how balanced those monsters are, how jerky those monsters are going to be, how good they're going to be, how bad they're going to be, how they're going to modify the play interaction. Now, just from going to the Kickstarter and zooming in on some of the monsters, I can see that some of these monsters are going to be kind of cutthroat, and they might tick off some players who don't like a lot of player interaction in the worker placement games. Now, the reason why worker placement games are so fun and they're very, very popular for a lot of people is they offer direct player interaction through denial, but it's never very cutthroat and never very backstabby. It's basically always a constant game where you always measure and always think like, okay, I have this worker here. I know I need that resource right there, but if that player right there gets that resource before me, I can't do this thing over here. So I need to know, do I do this thing right now and get those resources or balance it later? And that's kind of the mechanic that makes worker placement games so fun. Unfortunately, we don't know how badly these monster cards are going to modify that. And like I've said, I've already seen some monster cards that can be very much screw your neighbor by the fact that you can actually steal their cultists. And I know if you lose access to cultists, you lose access to actions. That's something that may annoy some players. But again, that's not something I can comment on. Also, the investigators, I don't know how random these investigators are. I know that they're going to modify the way the raids work, but that also brings me onto the topic of the raids themselves. Now, these raids are extremely random. Now, you can kind of math them out and see that if there's a 1-die raid at the beginning of the game, unless you roll a 6, there's probably a good chance that people are going to be surviving the first raids, especially if you have all 4 of your guys in the asylum, because it gives you a basic defense of 4. So even worst case scenario, somebody rolls a 6 on the very first raid, you're still going to knock 2 off or 4 off the strength of raid, leaving it down to 2, which means that you could sacrifice one of your priests very easily. And since all 4 of them are in your asylum, you're not really losing that priest, so you can basically send him to the escape. Get the strength of 6, so you know all the level 1 raids are, they're pretty much not something you really need to be afraid of in the game. The thing you really need to be afraid of, though, are the strength 2 and the strength 3 raids, because one very good roll of maybe like a 16, 17, or an 18, no matter how good your resources are and how good your defenses are, that can hit you very, very hard, especially if you weren't ready for it, if you weren't preparing for it, or something along those lines. I've seen a game of this game where one person lost 4 elder signs because they just need 1 more turn to get their defenses. Another player said, oh, it looks like you need 1 more turn to get your defenses going. How about we get a level 3 raid going? And that person just almost blew up the table. Well, not literally, but you get my point. All their hard work disappeared as they lost a ton of victory points, and that's basically the fickleness of dice. Now, what are the chances of you rolling a 16, 17, 18? Well, they're not very good, but it can happen, and that can very much mess you up very badly if you didn't plan for it, if you didn't prepare for it. So you could say it's only a negative if you don't prepare for it, but we know there are those players that are out there who like to have the perfect engine, don't concentrate on anything else, they razor focus on what they're doing, don't watch what the other players do, and the other players go, psst, by the way, bye-bye resources. And then you get very upset because you know there's no way to come back. Because that's one thing about this game, there really is 0 catch-up mechanic. Now, I say that because I need to back up a little bit. There is a minor catch-up mechanic by the fact that if you only have 2 cultists, the rest of your cultists are in your asylum, you can do some extra trickery because you never lose with cultists because you can never have more than 4 of them in your asylum. So you can do a little more trickery to kind of catch up. But if you lose 2, 3, or 4 of these elder signs, that's 20, 30, or 40 victory points. There's a good chance you're not coming back from that. So there's no real catch-up mechanic on that aspect at all. So that's something you need to think about when you play this game. We have a couple unknowns. We have a little bit of the fickleness of dice, and we have a little bit of a really screw your neighbor mechanic that can really hit somebody hard. So that's things you need to consider when you think about Evil High Priest. Also, the final thing is this game is listed as a game for 2 to 5 players. And playing with the basic cult boards, again, there's only 2 of them I have access to, Cthulhu and Black Goat. I would say that right now, in my opinion, this game is really a 3 to 4 player game. It lists 2 to 5, but with the cult boards I've seen, 2 is A-okay. It's not bad. I'm not going to say it's a terrible game. Most worker placement games I don't think are great at 2-player anyway, but I think they need to put a variant in there or something like that to make a 2-player game play a little bit better. But again, I need a caveat. I am saying this not knowing about monsters, not knowing about investigators, not knowing about the special priest powers, so there may be something I don't know. I can only say about the print and play itself, but as a 2-player game, not the best, and also as a 5-player game, it's also not as best. I think the game gets a little bit too crowded. But again, I don't know what the other boards look like. They may modify it, may change things up. Those are things I don't know. The basic bottom line here I have to say is that Evil High Priest, I had a lot of fun with it. It's an interesting take on the worker placement game, adds a little bit different mechanic, just enough to make me look at the game and say, hey, this is going to play differently than all my worker placement games. It has resources that are your victory points, where you're constantly fighting for them. It does everything a victory point, area control game, or not area control, but worker placement game should do, and I think it does it very well. The only warnings I would ever give about the game is the fickleness of the dice, the fact that your victory points are your resources, and the fact that you must protect those resources. And if you don't do it, it's going to be very easy to get hosed, no way to catch up, and you're basically going to be out of the game. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, as always, leave in the YouTube comments down below. I'm definitely going to do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. If you enjoy this video series, click that like button, click that subscribe button. As always, thanks for watching.